Hello and welcome, people who are coming in. It is so great to have you. Hello, Erin. It is lovely to have you. And I want to tell you guys all that I know Erin Van Rheenen from the Hippocamp Creative Nonfiction Conference, where she and I met 2 years ago or last year.
I think it's just last year, believe it or not.
And I loved what Erin was writing about travel, and I particularly loved how Erin approaches travel, not so much in the sense of, I went here, I did this thing, it cost this much, I give it 5 stars, and more from the perspective of, here is this cool, beautiful, unique, incredible thing that nobody else knows about and that I have made myself an expert on, and I'm going to share it with you. And I love that sense of being privileged to see something that not everybody gets to see. And I think Erin really finds that in her writing. In terms of her professional credits, Erin's written for AFAR, that wonderful travel magazine. She's written for Rick Steves. She's been on National Public Radio in the US. She wrote a wonderful guide to living in Costa Rica that I myself am studying carefully, and has written for a lot of other places too. So I will go ahead and let Erin say hello and get started.
Okay, welcome. I'm coming to you from California, from San Francisco, California. We're in our 62nd day of lockdown, shelter in place. It's an interesting time to be a travel writer. It's an interesting time to be a human being. But I want to thank Allison for putting this together. Allison is a dynamo, and thank you all for being here. So again, welcome. I'm Erin Van Rheenen. I'm a travel writer. It's 8 a.m. here in San Francisco. So I've got my coffee. It's a beautiful day on the West Coast. So again, strange time to be a travel writer. So there's a lot, it's sort of like it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. There's good news and there's bad news. And we all are mired in some of the bad news. And we know that airlines may never be the same. We know that airlines are flying at a fraction of their usual routes. We know that a lot of the travel industry is going to take a very big hit. And travel may not look like what it used to look like in the future. In terms of publishing, many of you may know that a lot of publications are laying off staff. Some of them are suspending publication. In-flight magazines like Southwest and Alaska Air, many of them have suspended publication. We don't know if they're going to be coming back. And when you think about it, of course, that makes sense because people aren't flying right now. But the other reason for that is physical. It's that airlines don't want to have very many things in the seat back pocket that people can touch and share. So we don't even know if there's going to be hard copy magazines in the seat backs anymore. So things are changing. But I promise it's not all bad news for travel writers. In some ways, this is a wonderful time to kind of hunker down, to go deep, to perfect your craft, and to start to just see travel writing for the very broad and elastic genre that it actually is. Because as Allison was alluding to, a lot of people, when they think of travel writing, they think of what's called service pieces. And that is, if you want to go to Cadiz in Spain, here's how you get there. Here's where you might want to stay. Here's where you might want to eat. So those are wonderful pieces, and we all need them, and we can write them. But travel writing is a lot more than that. There's a lot of travel adjacent writing, and we're going to be talking about that. So I just want to let you know sort of what we're going to be doing here. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I became a travel writer and whether or not I make a living at it, because I bet people want to know that. Some people imagine it's a very luxurious, glamorous occupation, and I'll just put that image on hold for now. I'll let you have that image for a few more minutes. So I'll talk about that. And then I'm going to read briefly from a piece I published in Southwest Magazine. And I'm going to use that piece as a case study for how I pitched that article, how I wrote and researched that article, how I got paid, how I took pictures. So it's going to be kind of a case study of one travel article. And then finally, we'll talk about how it's a good time to be a writer. It's a good time to be a travel writer. And I know that seems a little counterintuitive given the state of our world right now, but we'll talk a little bit about that and what you can do now to work on your writing and to work on your career as a travel writer. Between each of those three sections, we're going to take questions, so you won't have to hold them all to the end. So, jot down anything that is unclear to you about what I say or anything that I am not covering that you'd like to know. All right. So, how I got into travel writing, like so many of our lives, it's one part inevitability and one part accident. And the inevitability part is I love to travel, I love to write. It makes sense that I would be a travel writer. The accident part is that, I had many different jobs as staff writer, staff editor, and I landed a job at a travel publisher here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Some of you may have heard of Moon Handbooks. They're a little bit like Lonely Planet. They're very detailed guides. So I was an editor there. And I was an editor on things like Nepal, Moon Handbooks, Panama, Archaeological Mexico. This was one of my favorites because I love Latin America and I love archaeology. So I was an editor. I was there for many years. That press morphed. Moon Handbooks became Avalon Travel. Avalon Travel became Perseus. Perseus was gobbled up by Hachette. And meanwhile, they're acquiring lots of presses. One of the presses was John Muir Publications out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. A very small travel publisher. They had a series called Live Well In. It was a move abroad series, live well in Mexico, live well in Belize, live well in France. And as an editor, I was charged with rethinking the series and making it appeal to every age group, not just retirees. So that's fun. It's fun to reimagine a series. And then I started to think, I'd really rather be on the writer end of this than the editor end. And so I pitched them a book called Living Abroad in Costa Rica. I said, I know Latin America. I know Spanish. I've always wanted to go to Costa Rica. Let me write a book about people moving to Costa Rica. So they said yes. And that's the accident part. Like, it would have been harder. I wouldn't have had the in. I might not even have known to pitch. But I pitched it. They said yes. I moved to Costa Rica by myself right after a divorce, reeling, which is often how we make big moves in our lives, is we're reeling from some change and we need a new landscape. I thought it would take me 6 months to research and write the book. It took me 2.5 years.
Let me ask you, because it's a great book. How do you live there for 2.5 years? Like, were you doing other writing as well while you did the book? Or like, how did you manage to live in Costa Rica for 2.5 years? Because it's cheap, but it's not that cheap.
Good question. I had an advance. So often when you get a book contract, they will give you a little money ahead of time, which is called an advance. And what that means is that when your book starts to earn royalties, that they deduct the money they gave you from those royalties before they start paying you the royalties. So I had an advance, I had some savings, and I sold my house. So that was what allowed me to work there. That was what allowed me to be there. Yeah.
Wow.
And I did have some other assignments at the time. So that leads to, so this is it. This book has had some longevity. It's in its 5th edition. It's really interesting because when the first edition came out in 2004, the internet was just starting to be the place where people looked for travel information. But not the explosion of travel information that we now have. So the book did really well. But as books became less important and the internet became more important, the royalties go down. So now the landscape for travel writing, for writing in general, has so changed in the last 20 years that most of us read online more than we read offline. So that's something to think about when you are thinking about where to publish your travel writing. There are so many online outlets that don't even have a print counterpart. And they're often easier to pitch, and there's less of a problem with length because you can be as long as you want on the internet. Print, different story. So back to whether or not I make a living. I would say travel writing is not a very good job. It's a wonderful vocation. It's a wonderful passion project if you love to write and you love to travel. The way I make a living, the way I pay for my habit of travel writing is that I do science writing. I do editing. I do all sorts of things. And I used to think, oh God, I must be such a loser because I can't make a full living as a travel writer. And now I'm actually happy that I have so many different streams. My science writing informs my travel writing in that I can write about things like, the macaw life cycle or how butterflies, migrate. So I like that there are different things that enter into my stream of consciousness. So,
and would you find, so I was at a travel convention, the New York Times travel show a couple of years ago, and they had a whole panel about how for both the people writing travel and the people being written about, Instagram and bloggers are this giant minefield in the middle where they're like not following the same kind of ethical guidelines that travel writers usually follow, because Instagrammers and bloggers often get comped, which travel writers are not usually allowed to do. But they're all people that you can necessarily depend on for a really fair review. So like as consumers, they're not all that helpful.
Yes, that's a really good point. That I like your characterization of Instagram and influencers as a minefield, because I think it really is. I think the average reader does not understand how so many of these posts are sponsored and that they are being paid. And that's even a problem in places like TripAdvisor, places that are supposed to be neutral reviews. And so it's like there's an explosion of information, but it's not necessarily information that you can trust. So I do think there's room for the old-fashioned travel writer that isn't supposed to be comped. And the reason that's a problem, as you might imagine, is that if you accept freebies, there is this pressure, subtle or overt, for you to write in a certain way about the property or the experience. And you can tell yourself as much as you want, I have my ethics, I have my integrity. But if you are being bankrolled by somebody, that is a problem. And so you as a travel writer, you are going to have to wrestle with that. It's not like that many people are wanting to give freebies to many travel writers. The influencers are much more likely to get that sort of thing. But I just sort of stay away from that whole arena, because that kind of travel writing is not of any interest to me. It's like I don't care if somebody comps me a stay at a $600 a night property. It's like, that's not how I travel anyway. That's not how I have authentic experiences. That's not how I want to share my experiences. So I sort of stay away from that minefield, as you called it. So at this point, before I read a little bit from my work, I'm wondering, is this a good time to take a couple questions, Allison?
So Diane has a great question. What portion of your writing income comes from travel writing?
It depends on the year. I would say average 25%. And that is after working really hard to forge relationships with publications, with editors. That is after learning the hard way how to pitch. So that's a good case. That's like a best case scenario for me. And I live fairly modestly, so it's not like I have a huge, I don't need that much, let's say that. So 25%.
Kind of leads to a follow-up question. And since it takes time to build these relationships, is there any hope for someone who's just starting out?
There is hope for people who are just starting out. I would not pin my whole livelihood on it. I think that's a recipe for frustration. And I think it's wonderful if you have something that allows you to experiment a little bit, because even if you start doing really well, it'll take a little time to ramp up. It is possible to make a living as a travel writer. I know people who do it. I actually enjoy, as I was saying, I enjoy the different kinds of writing. I like travel adjacent writing, science writing. I also am working on a novel. So I don't, people can do it. People can do it. I have chosen to have a few different income streams and a few different areas that I'm passionate about. So yes, there is hope.
Freya wants to know, do you have advice for a young aspiring writer for getting into journalism and writing in general?
Wow. I would say write every day. I would say take classes. And one of the things about the weird situation we find ourselves in is, yes, it's going to be a while before we have in-person classes, but there are so many online classes and they're expanding around the world. So for instance, like I'm teaching a class starting in July through the Writers Salon in San Francisco, and it's a place-based writing class. And they didn't used to have classes online, so only people in the Bay Area would come to that class. Now anybody in the world can sign up for that class. So if you find a class, it doesn't matter where it is these days. So I think take classes, write every day, read widely, especially in the kind of areas that you hope to write in. If you want to be a travel writer, read widely on all the travel sites. Read AFAR, read BBC Travel, read Photers.com, read everything you can think of. And I'll get to this a little later, but reading widely is the most important thing to do if you want to be a writer. And you will start to read with a writer's eye. You will start to reverse engineer the books and the articles that you appreciate. You'll say, I love this article. Why do I love it so much? There's such a sense of immediacy. There's such a sense of sensory overload. It's like, oh, she writes very short sentences that start to build the momentum. Oh, she takes care to describe what she's smelling, not just what she's seeing, but what she's tasting, what she's hearing. So it brings the senses alive and really brings you there. So I would say read widely, read like a writer, write every day, and do what you're doing right. You're doing what you're doing right now. You're being part of a larger literary community. You are listening to other people talk. you probably know the members of the Dubai Literary Salon. You're already on the right track. It's really hard to do it alone, but there are angels like Allison who bring people together, who organize events. And I so appreciate them, especially now when we're all stuck in our homes. It's like all the more important, those people that are connectors. So, yeah.
And I think too that as you read widely, you start discovering what you enjoy. So if you want to write travel, read a whole bunch of travel until you discover, do you love Lonely Planet style travel? Do you love Condé Nast style travel? What is the most fun for you to read? Because that's probably going to be what's the most fun for you to write. If you are writing plays, read plays. If you are writing young adult, read young adult. If you are writing mystery, go back and notice how they drop in all of the clues and point you in one direction or another. And then I'd love it if you got into as well, does travel memoir writing become part of your writing output? Frank would like to know that. And is there much demand for it among the general reading public?
Okay, I will, but I want to go back one step to what we were talking about reading widely. When we are not able to travel, where we're mostly homebound, this is the perfect time to start reading widely online and figuring out where we think our writing will find a home. So, for instance, I love BBC Travel. They have really in-depth, substantial travel narratives, and that kind of leans in the direction of travel memoir, travel narrative. It's not a service piece. It's not telling you where to stay, the cheapest flight, et cetera, et cetera. It is taking you through the experience of an individual who is somehow transformed by his or her visit to this place. It's a deep dive, and it takes a lot from the author to do that deep dive. It's verging into the territory of creative nonfiction. It's verging into the territory of memoir. So it's a balance, because it's still about a place, but it's also about your experience of that place, how that place affected you. So I do think there is a market for that now more than ever. Some of you may know the magazine and website Fodors, FODORS.com. What's interesting about Fodors is they are mostly known as the home for top 10 travel stories. I wrote, top places to see petroglyphs in the world. People write top 10 Hello Kitty themed attractions, top 10 rooftop bars in Barcelona. These are service-oriented pieces. They love the top 10 lists. Everybody loves top 10 lists. I mean, I want to pitch top 10 reasons why top 10 lists suck, but that's another story. But Fodors, even Fodors, who is known as this pretty service-oriented thing, they have said, we are now open to more personal stories, more narrative-driven stories, more memoir-inflected stories, because that's what people are hungry for right now. So think about it. Think, you want to go to a new place. Let's say you want to go to Argentina and you've never been there. So you put out the word. You put out the word to your friends and your friends of friends. Who's been to Argentina? Who can tell me what I should expect, what I should be doing? So you'll get the people who say, this hotel's amazing, this restaurant's amazing, make sure you go to this winery. That's incredibly valuable. But you'll also get the people that tell you stories about what happened to them in Patagonia and how they almost died hiking the Torre de Pane, okay? So they're not telling you where to stay or where to go, but you are going to remember those stories long after you forget which hotel you stayed in and which restaurant you ate in. So that is sort of the difference between service-oriented journalism, service-oriented travel writing, and deep dives, narratives, more personal stories. Those personal stories are harder to write, but they're certainly more interesting to read. And I think in the state we find ourselves in right now, people are hungry for them and editors are hungry for them. So that is skipping ahead. That is one of the ways this is a wonderful time to be a travel writer, because those stories are often about trips that you've already taken, that you are grappling with in terms of like, why was that trip so incredibly important to me? Why do I still remember this person that I met on the bus? And you grapple with that and you bring that to life for a reader. So it's kind of like this formula. It's like, I went to this place, one person. I left that place, a different person. Let me think about the steps that contributed to that transformation. And then you try to bring the reader along on that journey.
Erin,
And to me,
how much does the timeline matter? Because Pashnal would like to know, it's been a year since she had an incredible experience. Is it too late to talk about it now?
God, no.
Do you have to be?
God, no. I am writing about trips I took 20 years ago. It's how you frame it. It's like, yes, it's maybe too late to talk about like the hot new club that you went to, because that's been a year. So it's like, when you're talking about novelty or new developments, then you have to have gone there pretty recently. But when you're talking about the essence of a place and the people there, no, 1 year is nothing. 1 year is nothing.
So Annabelle wants to know, do you have any practical tips for remembering great dialogue or great moments if you don't have a ton of time to write them down in the moment? Is it something you just get better at? I know Annabelle to be incredibly sharp and lovely. Annabelle claims her mind is like a sieve, but I think she's just being so modest. But she says she's lost stories. How do you remember stuff that happens in the moment?
That's a really good question. And I'll tell you, when I'm on the road and I'm experiencing things, but also writing things down for future stories, I have a few tools. One is I set aside at least an hour or two each night to write. That seems like a long time, but I don't even get it all down. And so you'd be amazed if you sit down every night and you start thinking and you start trying to describe the experiences you have, and you describe the people that you've met, and you try to remember the snippets of dialogue, you will remember them. But only if you write every night. And a lot of trips don't build that in. Like travel writers know to build that time in for them to write. If you go on a trip and it's whirlwind for 3 weeks, guaranteed you will not remember most of it, especially the fun little details, the telling details about people and places and conversations. But this is my favorite notebook. Look how nice and skinny it is. It fits in a lot of different pockets. I scrawl things in it. This is my favorite tablet that I take, and it's got so I can write on the bus. This is my very bare bones camera. A camera is another wonderful tool. It's a great memory device. It's not just that editors like you to provide your own photographs, which they do. It's that I take pictures of details. Like, it's like, so this restaurant had this weird fish tank. I'm going to take a picture of it. So if I want to describe it later, I can say what kind of fish were swimming in it. I meet somebody. Can I take your picture? So that if they become a character in my travel narrative, I'll go, oh, wow, I'd forgotten they wore that weird hat, So these are all memory devices. And it's a great question because it is hard to remember those things. And you don't always know when your story alive. So take as many notes as you can and take as many pictures as you can.
And I think that's a way too where travel writing can also inform our novel writing and our short story writing. Iabel asks, when writing deep dive narrative pieces, is it important that they be nonfiction? Is there any overlap with fiction, or is it a different category when place figures prominently in fiction? I'm going to send Isabel and I'll put it on the recording as well, a link to a story by Pam Houston called The Corn Maze that deals a lot with whether or not you have to tell the truth all the time in your story. Erin, do you get to make shit up, or is fiction a separate category?
I think fiction is a separate category. You use the tools of fiction to bring a true story alive. The tools of fiction are wonderful description, narrative arc, so that, you know, something actually happens and something actually changes. You use the tools of fiction in how you describe characters. You use the tools of description in so many ways in fiction. So I'd say don't make shit up, but how you choose to present a story, there are all sorts of decisions you make. There are all sorts of ellipses, like you don't be too married to chronology, because there's nothing more boring than, well, I decided to go to this place. I made a reservation. On the plane, I did this. I arrived in the airport. They picked me up. This happened, this happened, this happened. No. What you want to do is divorce the chronology of your story from the story you want to tell. It's not that you are writing about your trip to Spain. It's that you are writing about something that your trip to Spain illustrates or brings to life. So it's not follow along as I go to Madrid and Cadiz and Sevilla. It's more, I rediscovered a part of myself I never knew. I had forgotten about, dancing all night, the flamenco, something like that. So it's kind of like, I think the mistake people make when they're doing the deep dive travel narrative is they are too step by step. They start too early and they end too late. It's like, narrow the focus. Think about one moment, one conversation, one trip to a museum that is an anecdote that somehow contains the whole of what you want to say about this place. So I think, and it's hard because you got to write a lot sometimes about a trip or about a place before you realize, oh my God, here's the kernel. And then you bring that kernel alive and let everything else fall. So,
will you share with us a piece of your writing and then walk us through the process of how did you come up with the idea? How did you pitch it? What kind of edits did it go through? I think we'd all love to kind of see like that peek into the process.
I would love to do that. Thank you. Let's see. So I am going to read the first 5 paragraphs of an article I wrote for Southwest Magazine. Southwest Magazine, of course, is the magazine, the in-flight magazine for Southwest Airlines. This is a 3,000-word article. Now, when I get an assignment with 3,000 words, I do backflips because I love to write long. I love to write deep. When I get when someone says you have 600 words, I'm like, oh God, I have so much to say. I can't say it all in 600 words. So 3,000 words, I'm like, yes. So,
and often you're getting paid by the word too.
Yes. So that's helpful. So this is I gotta get some light on the subject here. The title is Meow, Wolf's Infinite World. I don't know how many of you have heard of Meow Wolf. I'll leave that there, and we'll see if you get it in the first couple paragraphs. This will only take about 4 minutes to read, and then I'm going to take you through the process of how I pitched, researched, and wrote this article. One Friday night in the spring of 2011, a band of young artists in Santa Fe, New Mexico, prepared to launch a ship. For months, they had worked day and night to complete the 75-foot craft, creating a control room full of interactive gadgets, an onboard forest of color-changing trees, and a novel-length log of the ship's odyssey through space and time. In case that wasn't enough to signal that this was no ordinary vessel, there was the figurehead jutting from the prow, a six-breasted winged mermaid with the head of a leopard. How the ship would set sail in landlocked Santa Fe didn't faze the members of Meow Wolf, a collective of creative souls who first came together to assemble art installations that often resembled alien wonderlands. The ship, the Due Return, was their biggest project yet. Meow Wolf had constructed other temporary installations, earning local acclaim. But this, built inside the well-respected Center for Contemporary Arts in Santa Fe, would be a turning point. It was their most ambitious project yet, and the first time Vince Kadlubeck, the man who would become Meow Wolf's CEO, realized the artists could create something sustainable. We had a product on our hands, he would later say in the documentary Meow Wolf Origin Story. The group has come astonishingly far since then, funding its work at first through grants, donations, and ticket sales. The art collective found investors and became a for-profit corporation. And in 2016, Meow Wolf opened its first permanent exhibition, The House of Eternal Return, a constantly evolving psychedelic funhouse that has drawn hundreds of thousands of people to a repurposed bowling alley in Midtown Santa Fe. Along the way, Meow Wolf has made millions of dollars and hired hundreds of creative workers. As the popularity of experiential attractions continues to change the way we take in galleries, museums, and even meals, Meow Wolf stands out for its startling originality and creative vision. It seems poised to continue shaping immersive experiences, upending the art and entertainment industries. In the next few years, Meow Wolf will bring its interactive installations, part amusement parks, part offbeat art exhibits, to cities across the country. But on the night they christened the Due Return, the ragtag band of artists who had forged a family in Meow Wolf couldn't know where the ship would take them. The group had faith in its work and its communal process, which walked a thin line between anarchy and organization. But who knew what would come next? Exhausted and exhilarated, they popped the champagne, raised their glasses, threw their heads back, and howled. Literally howled. Meow Wolf is still howling, and more people are listening. So that's the start.
Everyone's clapping in their homes, right? We're all like,
thank you. I know it's so weird to read to people that I can only see you're only this big. So I want to take you through how that article came to be in print and online. And as I'm speaking, think about things that you'd like to know about that process that maybe I will forget to mention. So first thing I want to say is is that travel writing? Well, it's not service-oriented piece. I'm not telling them the admission price is this, the best day to go is this, what else you should see in Santa Fe. What I am doing is I am taking a deep dive into an attraction that is an unusual phenomenon. And I'm talking about its history. I'm talking about where it's going from here. I'm talking about how it affects the economy and the spirit of the city it's in. So this was so fun. I mean, it's like, this is so up my alley. I had such a good time with it. I spent literally hundreds of hours on this. So let me take you step by step. Let me pull back the curtain. So this was my second piece for Southwest Magazine. So that's a wonderful position to be in. The editor already knows your name. The editor already knows that you can deliver on deadline. The way I first did it, the first thing is I pitched cold. which is I thought of something I thought would be good for Southwest Magazine. I pitched to their general email. I can't remember what it is, but you can usually find it online. Let's say it's pitches@southwest.com. And I pitched them. Not this one, a different one. So what is a pitch? Some of you may know. A pitch is a brief and compelling description of what you want to write for these people. And it's taken me years to understand that pitching is its own genre. Pitching is something you have to learn. Pitching is not easy. And a good pitch often takes almost as long to write as the article does, because you have to conceive of the whole, and you have to, it's like a come hither thing. You have to pique someone's interest enough for them to say, I think that's a great idea. I think that would be a good fit for this publication. We're going to take a chance on you, and we're going to let you write that, and we're going to pay you for it. So that's the process.
I want to just volunteer really quickly as far as the details, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but I've heard that the 3 things you need to cover in a pitch are why this story right now, why is it important, why should it be told, why this magazine or website or TV program or whatever, like why is it a good fit for them, and why am I the very best person to write it? Does it tie into my science writing experience? Is it a theater thing and I'm also a theater person? Do I live in Santa Fe next door to the Meow Wolf Collective? You know, so why this story? Why this venue? Why me?
That is absolutely correct, Allison. And that reminds me that you're not only trying to sell this story idea, you're trying to sell yourself. And it really helps if you have some background. So I pitch, but I don't pitch this story. I pitch a completely different idea that I'm incredibly excited about, that I work really hard on. I'm not even going to go into that article, that. They come back and they say, really nicely written pitch, not for us. And you hear that again and again. And it's like, great, I'm glad you like the pitch. I really would have preferred if you wanted me to write the article, because each time you write a pitch, it's like you get excited and you're like, I want to do this, and I'm gonna interview this person, I'm gonna travel here, and I'm gonna do this. And they say, I don't think so. But what they did say is, what we're working on now is we're working on origin stories. Do you have anything along those lines? And I'm like, if they tell you what they need, thank God they did. And if you can think of something if they are inviting you to pitch again, they value your ideas, even if that one idea wasn't for them. So I'm like, origin stories, what does that even mean? It's like, okay, it's like how companies got started, how restaurants got started, how this got. So I'm like, how can I find something that interests me, that I have the background to write, that fits into what they're looking for? And this is always the struggle. It's like, they want this, but you kind of are really interested in this. It's like, where does it meet? Does it meet? If it meets, that's the fertile place.
And when you submit the pitch, do you also include like links to your writing or some kind of portfolio? Like, how do you show I'm a qualified writer?
So I thought for a while, like origin stories. I'm like, I'm obsessed with the Southwest of the US. I'm going to visit Albuquerque, a friend in Albuquerque. I've always wanted to see Meow Wolf. They are hot, hot, hot right now, and they are expanding. So I'm going to pitch them the origin story of Meow Wolf. And and because there was back and forth, my pitch was pretty short. It was like, but it showed that I knew what I was talking about. And they're like, yes, Meow Wolf. And
you mean like under 300 words short?
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I said, the reason I am the person for this job is I worked for 10 years as a staff writer at a hands-on immersive science museum called the Exploratorium. They're kind of this, talk about a ragtag band of mad scientists and crazy artists. that is that museum. And this is kind of the arts version of a hands-on science museum. It's immersive, it's hands-on, it's crazy, it's like mind expanding. So I'm like, I can interview the ex-director of the Exploratorium, who I knew from working there. He is now on the board of Burning Man. Burning Man, I don't know if you know what that is. It's this crazy eruption in the desert every year of art and community. It is another version of what Meow Wolf is trying to do. So I said,
establishing that you have unique expertise in this area.
Exactly.
And then you also send clips. Like, how did they know, oh yes, we trust Erin. Erin can string a sentence together.
I linked to other articles I had written that I was proud of. And I tried to articles that showed them that I knew this area, like that I'd written about the arts, that I had written about science, and this was a unique opportunity for me to explore this immersive hands-on arts thing. And you don't always have that. So you have to connect the dots for them. Like, no, I haven't written about Antarctica before, but I have written travel narratives that take on adventure and something like that. So sometimes you have to connect the dots if you don't have that specific area of expertise. The reason I approach Southwest is because there's always chatter among writers, and I think it's really important for writers to share their experience. And I'm in lots of online writers groups. I'm on, I have lots of writer friends, and we all talk about like, who are the good editors to work with, who pays. So Southwest, the reason I approach them, besides being obsessed with the Southwest, is they pay $1 a word. And that might not seem like much, but in this industry and these days, that's good. That's really good, especially if you got a 3,000 word article. So I pitch the high paying places first. If I get no's, I go down to the less high paying places. And sometimes the money doesn't matter to me. A story is so close to my heart, and I think it's important to get out there, and I don't care what I'm paid. But
if you've been for a magazine before, how long does it take before they'll take another one of your pieces? Like, can you just pitch another one as soon as they print it, or do you need to wait for a while? Like, what's the etiquette there?
You can pitch whatever you want. It's like if you land an article, you're working on that article, but editors know that freelancers are always juggling projects. So you can, as you're working on that article, you could say, had another idea for a future issue. Here it is. And here's you probably have heard this, but it's really important to get comfortable with rejection, because more often than not, you will be getting no, it's not right for us, or crickets. No response at all. I can't tell you how many pitches I've sent out that receive absolutely no response. And I usually wait a week or 10 days and I follow up, and I said, just wanted to make sure you got this. And if they don't respond after that, they're off my list, So, but it's very common, and it doesn't mean that your idea is not good. It doesn't mean you're not worthy. It just means you've got to move on to a different publication.
Is there a ratio of like acceptances to rejections that you would say is the sign of being reasonably professional at what you're doing? Like, when I'm talking to people about submitting to literary magazines, I tell them, if you get one acceptance for every 10 to 25 submissions, you are doing amazing. Like, 1 out of 10 is a fantastic rate. Is that similar to travel? Is it more rejections per acceptance?
I'd say if you're getting 1 out of 10, you are on fire. Because I would say I'm happy if I get 1 out of 25 accepted. I mean, I'm happy. You just pitch and you pitch and you pitch and you pitch, and it's a numbers game. And I love, I saw this is a great way to think about it. It's like, I want to get 100 rejections this month. Because if you get 100 rejections, that means you are sending out that much stuff. So I want to get, and then you're saying, oh, great, I'm up to 30. Wonderful.
And when you say they're off your list, Diane wants to know, does that mean they're permanently off your list because they're jerks who don't respond? Or does that mean, okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing, and if I have another thing that might be right for the people who won't respond, I'll pitch to them again, and maybe one day they'll respond?
The latter. The latter. I may pitch to them again, but I have a spreadsheet, a pitching spreadsheet, and I keep track of the idea that I sent to this editor, whether or not they respond, because if you pitch a lot, you forget. So occasionally I'll go down my spreadsheet. I'm like, oh, this person, they had a really nice rejection, a really encouraging rejection, and they invited me to pitch again. Oh my God, I should pitch them again. This person, God, I pitched them like 4 stories and they never ever got back to me. I think that's a sign to maybe not pitch them anymore. So it's not like a one-shot deal, but if over the months you realize these people never ever respond, it's not worth my time to send to them.
Yeah. And they may not be a good fit for you. You may not be a good fit for them. It's not like they're looking at your work and saying, oh, this is crap. They're just looking and going, you know what? Not right for us right now.
Right, exactly. Long story short about this piece, it took me hundreds of hours. I interviewed 6 different people. I traveled to Santa Fe. The other reason Southwest is great because they were one of the few people that paid some of your expenses. That's incredibly rare. Okay. It went through a lot of editing. I respected my editor, which is not always the case. When this editor said, I think it would be better to prune this or go in this direction, I actually respected what he had to say. It made it a better piece. Good editors are the unsung heroes of the publishing world. And bad editors, there's a lot of them. But before we go, I want to say why I think this is a wonderful time to be a travel writer. Think about why you travel. Think about the function that travel has in your life. We travel because we want novelty, we want challenge. Think of when you go to a new place, you are making hundreds of new decisions every day. When you're at home, you're in your sort of habitual, your routine. And when you're in habitual routine, your senses shut down. You don't notice things as much. We love travel because it opens our eyes, because it freshens our senses. So the challenge is, can you turn those fresh eyes to your own backyard? Can you start to see what's around you with new eyes? And especially now, when we aren't even allowed to go many places, when you finally are, it's like when I go to a park nearby, it's like, oh my God, how have I never seen that particular tree or that particular bison paddock from this angle? It's because my eyes are open, because I haven't been able to go to these places that I love. And wherever you are, you have the same situation where you are in a place that you know very well, or you think you do. But I hear from people again and again in San Francisco, I went and I walked into the Presidio, and how have I never seen the X? Or why have I never thought about how blah, blah, blah? So it's like you can open your eyes to the familiar as if your hometown were an exotic location. That's one. And then you can think about trips that you've taken and start to write about them. You can start keeping a journal and work on your craft. You can work on character sketches of people you know or people you see. You can work on all sorts of things like that, and you can be part of the literary community, which is what we're doing right now. And I think we have 1 minute left.
Will you leave us with some of your favorite books that you think are great examples of travel writing? And will you also let us know, where should we start our research for how to find the places that we should pitch? So your favorite books that are great travel writing, and how do you do the research that you know where to pitch?
So the first thing about, I'm just going to get up for a minute because I'm looking at my bookshelf. Just a second.
And while you're browsing through the bookshelf, I will let people know that if you get a chance, cruise by our Instagram. This week we've put up 16 different Instagram stories that were part of our virtual open mic. All the pieces connect with travel in some way, whether that's literal or metaphorical. Do find us on Instagram. That is where we announce all of our events and salons. And if you have a great idea for who we should invite to come speak next month, please do either respond to the email where you got the link or contact us through Instagram, because I always want to know what kind of writing you want to hear about. So Erin, tell us about your favorite travel books.
Bruce Chatwin in Patagonia, amazing travel. Talk about deep dive. I love Bruce Chatwin, especially this. Patagonia, of course, is at the tip of South America. It's in Argentina. Beautiful writing, a great model if you want to take deep dives. Similarly, Paul Theroux, The Great Railway Bazaar. He took a train from, I can't even remember, but he is one of those crusty, irritable travel writers that is hilarious in the way he characterizes people and places. Love that. Then I would go to the anthologies. Best Women's Travel Writing. The 12th edition is coming out this fall, but they're all great.
That's a place that starts to answer Angie's question about how do we do the research, because if you pick up a copy of Best Women's Travel Writing, there's going to be features like, oh, this one is from this magazine. Yes. This one is from that magazine. Exactly. And it's a good way to get sense of a whole bunch of different magazines' style and what they like. Another
wonderful anthology, The Best American Travel Writing, comes out every year, every couple of years, same thing. And one thing you'll see that's interesting is you look at these pieces that have been anthologized and that are wonderful, and you're like, wait, this wasn't even published in a travel publication. This was published in Harper's or the Atlantic or in a general interest newspaper, not even in the travel section. So this is travel writing, as I was saying, is a very broad genre. It can take on the economy. It can take on customs and habits of a country. It can take on all sorts of things. And that is reflected in the way that these supposedly incredible travel writing pieces aren't even in travel writing magazines. So look to general interest publications and look for pieces that take on the spirit of a place in a lot of different kinds of ways. Online, which is what we're all doing right now. I mean, Google best travel stories. Go to AFAR.com. Go to bbctravel.com. Go to Photers.com. I mean, they're everywhere. One thing that I like that might not be on people's radar is a place, I think it's called Off Assignment. So Google Off Assignment is great. Travel writing, and that's another deep dive. And I mean, the wonderful thing about the internet, it created this explosion of places that have high quality, long form journalism, Catapult, Brevity, long reads, all these places that have long form pieces that are wonderful. And you'll start, I mean, it's kind of like endless, and you will find your tribe. You will, you might go to some place, oh, she thinks this is great, not my style. But you'll go to another place, you go, oh my God, I love the tone. I love what they cover. And then you start to develop a relationship with this outlet in that you understand what they're looking for. You understand what they've already covered, and you can pitch them something in the vein of what they're interested in, but that they haven't already covered. Beautiful. Well, Erin, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. It's been really fantastic to have you here. This has been one of our best attended salons. And do feel free to let us know what other kinds of writing, what kind of speakers you want to hear about. And Erin, thank you so much. I'm so honored that you were able to come and be our guest here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for listening to me. It's great to see you all. And thank you, Allison, again, for organizing all of this. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yay.